The following is a presentation of 13ABC Action News. Now, your table is ready. Join 13ABC's Jeff Smith with the decision makers of Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. This is the Roundtable.
Thank you so much once again for joining us here on this Sunday edition of the Roundtable program. My name is Jeff Smith. The next half an hour we're going to spend with you talking about transportation here in the Toledo area, and a plan that has been well in the works for the last couple of years. But over the last couple of weeks, you may have seen it online. ToledoAirports.com is one place you could go to see this privatization plan for Toledo Express Airport, also Toledo Executive Airport. We are glad to have with us Doc Treese, also Doc David Treese, joining us here on the Roundtable. Gentlemen, thanks for taking the time to talk about this plan with us.
Thanks for having us.
Let's talk a little bit over the next, Doc, you said this is not something that's new. You guys have been looking at the possibility of operating the Toledo Express Airport and Toledo Executive Airport for years.
Well, we started some time ago looking at some of the shortcomings, and it's basically because when Bax left, it left a big hole in the airport operations, and there wasn't a lot to fill that hole. And so we started looking around saying, you know, is this something that's possible? As a matter of fact, early on, Doc David came to me and said, you know, let's look at this. And I said, you know, I don't think we can do anything here. I think I've fought these battles for 20 years in trying to improve things around the airport. But if you want to chase it, feel free.
You've been an investment advisor. You and I have done stories over the years, and as you look at something like this, obviously being established with one business and then looking into something of which some people say you have no business looking into because you have no experience. What do you say to that, Doc David?
Well, I guess my response is that people know us for our investment advisory business. That doesn't mean it's our only business interest. We've, over the years, been involved with a number of businesses in very different sectors, from real estate management, both commercial and residential, to, yes, the investment advisory business. But, you know, Dad has owned aircraft leasing companies. We've been involved in a lot of different things, and a lot of them have a lot of relevance to this type of project. So we don't feel in any way limited by our previous expertise. Yeah. If anything, we know where to go and find the experts and the consultants that we need to help us make a project like this successful.
Doc, let me say this to you, and this is one of those things over the years. You look at people who come onto the scene. You're not a newbie by any stretch of the imagination as far as getting your name out there, but you look at the projects in this Toledo, Northwest Ohio area over the last couple of years, and these people are either going to be saviors or they're going to be goats, if you will. Their names will live in infamy as not having done something that was good for the city. What was it about Toledo Express that you said, I think we can help. I think we know the fix?
Well, it was, to us, it was obviously an underutilized asset. And anytime you're, even in the investment world, you look for assets that are underutilized or undervalued or not being used to their potential, and you try to figure out a way to make it better.
But this wasn't just based on the lack of commercial traffic out of this airport the last decade, yes?
No, it wasn't based on that. It's based on the lack of businesses around the airport. And to some extent, that's by design, because at one point in time, people thought that overnight freight was going to be the answer to everything in the world. And so they tried to position Toledo to grow into that market. Well, what happened is the economics on that market changed and destroyed overnight freight for the most part. And they had no alternate plan. They had no backup plan.
You gave an analogy where we were talking money and fuel. Tell people what you were talking about.
Well, when overnight air freight was popular, money was expensive, and jet fuel was cheap. So it made sense, rather than maintaining an inventory, which cost money, to ship overnight because jet fuel was so cheap. It was so cheap to ship overnight. Well, today, money is cheap and jet fuel is expensive. So the economics that made overnight freight popular don't exist today. Now, will they come back? Maybe, but probably not for a long time.
Doc David, when you guys look at your plan, there's been some question about where is the business plan? Where is the model for this possible operation? You say that you look at this. I want to relay this to our viewers today so it's more, I guess, understandable for them, how it affects them. How does your plan benefit Northwest Ohio, our viewers, and the people?
Well, the immediate impacts are numerous. For one, right now Lucas County taxpayers through the Port Authority are funding several $100,000 a year in operating deficits, and those would be eliminated immediately from the taxpayer standpoint. If there are any operating deficits, it's on us. Second, if we can bring in companies to locate facilities or operations at either airport, that's jobs and traditionally fairly high-paying jobs for residents in this region. In addition, we've tried to structure this in a way that allows us to put property back on the county's tax rolls to be contributing to the county coffers, so that there is more money for capital improvement projects around the county. But in addition to bringing businesses to this area that will create jobs, it will also expand the services that can be offered to both residents of our region and for transient traffic.
I know we deal with a lot of, you got to keep your cards close to the vest, and we've talked about that in private business before we came on here today. But are these all hypothetical, or are you looking at potential companies that have said, Doc Treese, Doc David, we are ready if you get the keys?
Yes, we have heard.
Yes to which?
Yes, we have a number of companies that are extremely interested in opening facilities at one of the airports servicing Toledo if we can get control and help work with them. Yeah. And they are diverse in industry and services. They range from military contractors to scheduled charter operators who want to operate small point-to-point airlines, not the size of a Delta, yeah, but for your business traveler that, time's more important than money, and they need to go to a New York or to an Atlanta for a meeting, and they want to be back for dinner, and the company that's employing them does not want them wasting time driving an hour north and then parking their car and walking through TSA and having to sit at the gate. They want them working until it's time for the plane to take off.
What is your contention of why they aren't here yet?
Right now, we don't think they're here because of the time it takes to get to market. Whether it's a service provider, an airline, or a scheduled charter operator who wants to start offering services to local residents, the time it takes them to get wheels up, so to speak. But also a company that's interested in locating a facility at one of our airports, the time that it takes for them as a tenant to be vetted, for them to find a site, to go through the entire permitting process is far too long. And we've tried to structure this in such a way that we will have the autonomy that we need, that if there's a large military contractor or an aircraft refurbishing company or an avionics company that wants to come to Toledo, this region needs the jobs desperately. And we want to be able to act as quickly as possible to get them here, get them operating, start employing our residents, start providing services to people in this region, and help the airports drive economic impact for this area.
Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is the problems we've run into in rolling this out are the same problems that a lot of corporations have run into. In some cases, the Port Authority, by design, it's not their fault, it's nothing bad on their part, but they are a public entity, and so they have to go through a process. In that process, the company who may be looking to come here becomes public knowledge. It then gives them, and I hate to say this, but some portions of our media, it gives them an opportunity to pick it apart and quite often oppose it when it should never have been opposed. And it wasn't fully developed. The system was, or the concept wasn't fully developed. And as a result of that, a lot of companies simply walk away because they don't want the public exposure until they're ready to roll it out. And that's part of what we've done here. Is that's why we've rolled this out piece by piece, is we don't want the whole thing thrown out there to be picked apart and then say, well, that's all there is to the story. There is more to the story. There's a lot more to the story. But we're going to roll it out in a format that people have a chance to absorb it, not get hit with it all at once, not be able to absorb it and say, well, that's a dumb idea.
But is it, and I know the naysayers who you're referring to, but is it ready to be rolled out, or is it gradually being built?
It's right here.
Okay.
I mean, it's done. Unless, we receive contact through the website that leads us to believe there are credible revisions that should be made, we're done. What we want to do is to try to make the conversation.
What are we seeing here? For people who have not gone to the website, explain what we're seeing
this
here.
This is everything, including some things that haven't been.
The entire business plan.
Exactly. Including things that haven't been posted to the website yet, but will be. This is our full business plan. This is a 10-year financial forecast. This is the marketability study that's already up on the website, and we would hope that people would go and read it to understand what opportunities there are for Toledo's airports that aren't currently being taken advantage of. But
and we're showing video. I want to point out, I'm sorry to interrupt. We've been showing video of Toledo Express. Obviously, Toledo Executive is part of the deal as well.
Correct.
Please
Exactly.
continue.
It also includes some information on us, our business backgrounds, the qualifications that we think we have that will enable us to make this project successful. But what we've been trying to do in releasing documents one at a time is to have the most informed discussion in the public as possible. Let's first start with some of the frequent questions that we're asked, and some background about us and what we've done in business that a lot of people may not be aware of. Then let's come out with a marketability study and all the opportunities that we aren't taking advantage of. And before all said and done, we'll have the business plan out in the public. Now, it's not going to drill down to the company level to know, okay, which military contractor are you talking about locating here, or which airlines have you been in touch with, but to give people a general understanding of how we plan to operate the airports and how they'll be affected.
There has been a real regional frame of mind over the last, during the Bell administration. I know his Mayor Mike Bell in Toledo wanted to reach out regionally as far as the climate was concerned. We'll talk about Mike Collins in just a minute. I was telling you a couple of weeks ago, I had Russell Mills from Bowling Green State University, who used to be a former policy analyst with the FAA, and he pointed toward, and I want to put the quote up for folks to see at home just to remind them of what he said out here, but when we got into a conversation about commercial traffic, which obviously for our viewers, jobs are great. The possibility of expanding business out of Toledo Express is great, but I think, and you guys can attest to this, people hate change, and people, especially in Northwest Ohio and Southeastern Michigan, which is neither good nor bad, but you would agree? You're smiling.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think people hold fast onto the desire to have a viable commercial flight outlet out of Toledo Express. And there are questions as to whether we can ever get there again. He pointed out, and we just showed you, I want to read through it real quick and get your take on it. He said, quote, "One of the things I don't think a lot of folks realize is that a lot of the businesses in Toledo actually have deals with Delta to fly out of Detroit. So when folks complain that there's a lack of service at Toledo Express, a lot of times that's driven by a lack of community and business support." You agree or disagree, Doc?
Well, I think he's probably correct, but let me ask you this. If you were a business in Toledo and you needed to move people around, there's nothing flying out of Toledo, so what's your option?
But is it the
You've got to
chicken
go
or
to
the egg?
Exactly. Is it the chicken or the egg? Because they're going to go to Detroit and cut deals because it's cheaper than just going up and buying a ticket. So that's understandable. What we need to do is give them an option out of Toledo that may or may not be as cheap as Delta, but saves them time. And as I said earlier, that everything is interchangeable. Some people, money is more important than time. Some people, time is more important than money. For those people that money is more important than time, they will drive to Detroit and buy a cheap ticket and sit in a terminal for 2 hours waiting for their flight. For a businessman who needs to go to New York for the day, he will pay a little more for a ticket to fly out of Toledo, go to New York, do his business, and come home that night.
Percentage-wise, how much of this market feasibility study is based on commercial?
Well, the marketability study's all up online, and while the passenger service is a portion of that study, it's really one small piece. It's something that we think we can develop probably more substantially than is represented. But we're kind of we're going to have a lot of talks with airlines and with potential operators of alternatives.
Have you had any yet?
Yeah, we have. Mostly with smaller operators. you know, we don't want to misrepresent things and make everybody think that, you know, as soon as we take things over, that the next day they're going to be, you know, 8 carriers flying in and out of Toledo and we're going to be the next Detroit. Obviously, we hope that we can do some things in order to increase service for residents of this area, but that's going to take a little bit of time. I guess the point I would make, though, is that people look at the airline industry as it exists today. The same way 5 to 8 years ago, residents and leaders in this area were looking at air cargo the way it existed then. And we built our strategy around at Toledo Express around air cargo as it existed 5, 8, 10 years ago. And times changed. Right. And we can't look at the way airlines exist today and anticipate that things aren't going to change over the next 10 years. What we hope to be able to do is to anticipate some of those changes and work with some people who want to operate out of a Toledo Express, be they a large airline or a point-to-point carrier like Allegiant or a scheduled charter operator, to help them get out on the leading edge and provide it to Northwest Ohio residents early on.
I'm going to take a break real quick. Gentlemen, stay right there. We will be back right after this, continue our conversation here on the Roundtable.